Welcome to Studying Law Around the World. I'm Claudio Klaus. In each episode, I talk with lawyers, law students, and professors from different parts of the world to talk about legal education, careers, and what the profession looks like in real life. We talk about the hard parts, the surprises, and the decisions that shaped their paths. Whether you're planning to study abroad, thinking about working in another legal system, or just curious about how law works around the world, this podcast is for you. This episode is sponsored by Contender. How are you doing on LinkedIn? If you're like 99% of lawyers, your answer is not great, which makes sense. You learned LinkedIn as the place to stash a digital resume and share firm pressers. So no wonder your LinkedIn presence is somewhere between vanilla and non existent. But I've got good news. Since we all learned LinkedIn the wrong way, it's pretty easy to attract more positive attention for you or your business. Since 2022, Contender has been the premier agency helping lawyers go from invisible to impossible to ignore on LinkedIn. To learn more, check out www.contenderllc.com. Tell them Claudio sent you. Today, I'm here again with Erika Bailey. Thank you so much for joining us today, Erika.
Oh, I'm both happy and sad. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, it's great you mentioned that because there's a particular reason for this episode to be that. And can you take over and tell us a little more of what we're doing here today?
For sure. So, hi, everybody. This is Erika Bailey. I am the Graduate Career Advisor at the Faculty of Law, University of Toronto, and I use she and her pronouns. And this is the very last time that Claudio is allowing me the grace and the gift of hosting this podcast on his behalf. Very quick recap for anyone who's not yet listened in, but you're joining us for the first time. This time last year, this guy by the name of Claudio reached out and was like, I'm going to be a GPLLM student. I run this podcast. I want to interview you. I was like, who is this person? What are we going to do? And so I sort of thought about it. I thought, sure, I can interview, but I'm not as interesting as Claudio is for sure. And I thought, no, let's see if he'd be willing to co host. So he has graciously allowed us to have now our fifth conversation, I think it is, where I interview him because this time last year, he wasn't even in Canada, but was preparing to come and to begin his program. And I thought, what an incredible opportunity to interview an internationally trained lawyer who is figuring out how to license in another country and to learn about the junctures at which, we can reflect on what happens when you're sort of trying to qualify somewhere else. So that's why we're doing this. And so I guess maybe for those who haven't listened or those who love the episode so much they want to recap, Claudio, why don't you walk us through a little bit about some of the key points that we've touched on in the past episode?
Absolutely. So it all started with, being still in Brazil, getting my bags ready and basically sharing a little bit of what it felt like, what I was doing. At this time of year last year, I was applying for summer and articling jobs, right? So it's such an interesting timeline of how that goes. I got the chance to share a little bit of what it was like to prepare to leave and coming over. Talked a little bit about why I chose Canada, making plans with families, and also getting ready to start this new journey. And then got here and started a new episode, then sharing a little bit about the essentials or the first few things you do once you move to a new country. So all the essentials from setting up a bank account, phone plan, all kinds of things. And then school started finally, so got to learn a lot and share some of the insights from those first few classes we've had. And they were very, very foundational and very important to everything else we built upon in the upcoming classes. And our third episode, if I'm not wrong, talked a little more about the job market and what the interview experience was like and all of that, a little bit of the ups and downs of the regulated recruit, which included, rejections, waiting for results, and also staying grounded, leaning on family, finding my strengths and learning a little more about myself in the process. I really enjoyed that part. And then talked about in our previous episode about my project for the school's 75th anniversary, interviewing 75 lawyers, which was amazing, and talked a little more about networking, about community, about the idea of not wanting to just get a job, but actually build some more meaningful relation in this process.
And so that leads us to our final one, doesn't it?
That's right. That's right. That's what I'm thinking here.
Yeah, for sure. And so here we are, you're about to write your final exams, I think. And so I was wondering if you could reflect back on this final semester of time. What stands out for you? What's the hardest part? What do you want people to know about this sort of concluding their studies if they're pursuing a program of study to complete their National Committee on Accreditation assessments?
Yeah, it's incredible to be at this stage for so many different reasons, right? So I believe that the first big one that really comes to mind is I loved this feeling of finishing something I started. So many times in life, I've questioned myself whether I'm able to finish projects that I start because I really try to put a lot of energy, time, and intention in all the projects that I get myself involved in. And sometimes when you put a lot of that right in the beginning, it can be hard to get to the end with the same enthusiasm.
Mm,
And honestly, I've been so blessed and happy to have such a supporting community that allowed me to continue this process with that just that much of excitement, enthusiasm, friendship, and all of that. So I'm just very happy to be in this community that cheers me on, and to be a part of this community also cheering on the new students that are coming in, that are reaching out and all of that. But it's very interesting, this kind of ending a little cycle, that it's just one of the steps of becoming a lawyer here, but it's just a very important one. So very
mm,
excited, very in a tense mode as finals week always is. But I
mm,
think that if anything, it's because we care a lot about showing that we learned those contents and making sure that we have the best material selection to make sure that we go into the exams with all the resources we need. So it's been amazing in that sense. It's definitely a bittersweet moment.
sure. You're speaking about community, and I wonder if we could go back into that for a moment. You know, for certainly for anyone who's contemplating starting a journey like this, they may be wondering why you're talking about community. Who would you consider part of your community, and how did you discover them and build them coming new to Canada like that?
No, absolutely. So I think that the closest community we build is those colleagues that are with you every weekend, right? So naturally, those conversations don't end when class is over. We continue chatting during the week. We've met for lunches and coffee chats and all of that so that we could get to know each other a little better. And now everybody knows a little more about their counterparts and all of that. So definitely built a lot of friendships in that sense, and community. And that's, I think, the closest community we get. And then there's kind of a second level community, which are the other colleagues that are not necessarily that close group of friends, but also that you see them every weekend and you chat a little bit, and you always know a little bit about their lives and say, hey, how's your son doing, how's that thing doing specifically, you mentioned you were going on interviews this week, how did that go. It's definitely a point of contact there. And as part of that community as well, in that same level, if we were to make a category, I believe that the team that works at the university also is part of that, because they always see us over the weekend, always checking up on us and seeing how things are. And just like we do with our friends, saying like, hey, how's your son doing, how's your daughter doing, you guys too know that, and remind us that you know who we are. So it's very amazing to make us really see that this is not just about number or a profession, or just a professional responsibility you have as part of your job, but that does have a much deeper layer to that. And then the broader alumni community that we get to interact in different events and throughout the law school. But I definitely would say that the close community are those friends that you see every weekend.
Absolutely. And we often say that the value of the program is as much what you put into it and engage with it, meaning that you're setting up the chats, that you're going for that coffee with someone you just met, that you're reaching to new people in the class, but also you're reaching out to those alumni, you're attending employer events, that you are finding other members who can be part of your community that can support you during what can be quite a dynamic, changing, and sometimes challenging time. And so I think, especially to yourself and many, many others in this year's cohort, we saw a lot of engagement. And so the great outcomes are because of the great input. And so I just need to sort of add that as we sort of shifting our roles here from interviewer to interviewee. I just thought it's important to reflect on that. And, if you were to reflect back, so this time last year, you were like trying to figure out how you're going to put your whole life in a bunch of bags and bring your soon to be slightly larger family in on a plane, land in Canada. If you could go back to July 2024, Claudio, and give yourself 3 points of advice, what would you tell your past self?
Well, that's a good one. So I believe that the first thing that comes to mind is definitely something that we've discussed in previous episodes, and it is to get as much information as you can. Definitely, this ride has been somewhat smooth for me because I got the opportunity to hear from a lot of people and to get as much information as I could. So I don't feel like I came in blind in any part of the process. If I didn't understand it completely, at least I had a general idea of it. So I didn't feel in any moment that something caught me off guard or something just appeared out of nowhere and I had no clue. And that's thanks to that, thanks to looking for information, having a lots of generous people that were willing to share that. And I would definitely recommend the same. And so I would say, make sure that if you're coming to the GPLLM program, that you do participate actively in the Pathways to Licensing program to start with. That's our graduate career program where we get to learn all about employment and the NCA journey in Canada. So that's one of the very important points. And of course, talk to other people that have gone through it so they can tell you a little more about this timeline and how you can figure that all out, and especially how that's possible. How a lot of people did it and you can do it too. It might feel a little daunting when you first hear about how many steps there are, but once you're in it, I promise that it flows a lot smoother than it seems. And I think that that's a big number one thing. Number two would still in that same arena would be to get to know people, right? So be it for building that community we were just talking about. It's really hard to do things all on your own. Yeah, even if you feel like your personality is one that doesn't allow you to be energized, especially when you're interacting with other people, if that makes you tired, I would say that it's worth it. Be it for having people to just chat when you need to have people that can tell you a little more about a subject you didn't understand well in class, or be it for people who are just willing to maybe open some door for you and sponsor you along the way. So there's lots of different reasons why building community makes sense, and it makes sense to stay healthy and to have a sustainable career anywhere you go. So I would say look into meeting people, look into continually do that. And then for number three, I would say that an important step is also take one step at a time, right? So even though you want to be well informed about what's ahead, take time, take a deep breath, and take one step at a time. So as I said, it might feel like there's so much to be done, but if you go ahead and do one step at a time within the timeline, everything works out. Just like I said, lots of people went through this process before, so it's not like uncharted waters. And we definitely can make sure that with some organization and making sure that we keep our sanity, we can do one step at a time, and that just is a good way to make it work. Not only in the NCA journey to become a lawyer, but also for most things in life, right? I feel like just making sure you take your time to do things really helps. And even in that sense that I mentioned earlier, when you start something with too much enthusiasm, there's this little risk of burning out. So if you can step back for a second and just reflect on, I'm informed of what's ahead, there's nothing I can do for now, so I'll just be aware that that's going to happen in due time, but right now I'm just going to concentrate on what's in front of me. So not wanting to be no mindfulness coach or anything like that, but I do think that's a genuine piece that maybe even I could use a little more of as I go to in my day-to-day life here.
Thank you. Those are sort of points of wisdom, and I often think of wisdom not as you know something, but you know how to apply it. And, it's now July 2025, and you are finishing the program, you're halfway done your summer placement. And I'm curious how these 3 points of advice and any other thoughts you may have, you want to share about how does that show up in your current moment in time and at this phase in your journey to becoming a licensed lawyer in another country.
Hmm. No, absolutely. So speaking on those 3 points, right? On the first point about being informed of what's ahead and making informed decisions, that never ends. So any career you're building, any educational pursuit, you always have to be somewhat aware of what's ahead. So regardless of which stage you are right now, my a focus is understanding and making sure that I fulfill all the requirements to take the bar exam. And then I'm looking into what the bar exam looks like, what do I have to study for it, and how do I study for it. So those are my next few steps that I look ahead, but right now concentrating into my final exams for the GPLLM. So I'm still having to write a contracts exam this Sunday, and then that's all done. So it's only one to go. But yeah, definitely having to take a look at that, looking at what's ahead, but living the moment. My third piece that I shared. And then on the sense of building community, I did say that my community were those people that I was seeing every weekend, right? But now it's the next challenge of making sure that we still stay in touch and connect, even though everybody's going to be spreading a little more. We're not going to be seeing each other every weekend. How do you continually nourish those relationships, right? Because definitely we care about each other, but it's definitely something that in my end, at least, I feel like goes way beyond what the GPLM is, and it goes way more into our lives and real friendships that should hopefully be lifelong lasting. So I believe that that's what comes to mind. And beyond that, of course, making friendships at work, meeting people outside the program, obviously, and just yeah, taking one step at a time.
How is it going with your summer placement? I mean, without telling, tales out of school, but how are you finding the application of the knowledge that you've learned, your past, experience, and how are you finding it showing up or being challenged in your summer placement right now?
Absolutely. So, in my personal experience, we start our GPLLM with a class on legal research and writing. And when I first saw it, I'm like, oh, that's great. We'll reveal a lot of stuff that I already know about. We'll see maybe something new or not. But it was just incredibly helpful. It honestly, legal research and writing and negotiation have been two of the most useful classes because, of course, all of the hard subjects that go deep into the law are so important to understand the context and all of that. But it feels very much that those classes are things that, in a way, I could, research, read a book, and all of that. But these specific abilities and skills that we got to practice and hear feedback on and all of that, it wouldn't be as easy to just get out of, watching a video or reading a book. So in my day-to-day practice, I find myself reviewing those notes. There's a lot of principles that go into legal writing, especially for memos and all of that. There's substantive headings and point first writing where we start with the conclusion. So all of those principles that we learned about last August or last September, they keep coming up in a weekly basis in my work. And I feel there's some sense of pride to be like, hey, I remember that I studied this in class. Now it's time to put it into practice. So I think that's one of the points. And then as to my previous practice as well, a lot of being a lawyer in general, especially if you don't have, a lot of support team that you can assign things to, is being able to figure things out, solve problems. And that comes with lots of different ways. It can be, when you're finding some kind of roadblock and you just have to pick up the phone and call that third party and say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what we need to do. What do you say? Get to understand those situations. And then a second part of it is being tech savvy as well. Maybe I don't know how something works specifically, but I kind of take a look, figure it out, Google it, watch a quick YouTube video of how to do it, and then boom, it's done. Faster than asking somebody else to explain me how they usually do it, right? So there's a lot of that, a lot of figuring things out. I feel like that's one of the marks of my experience for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because as much as, substantive knowledge is so important, it's the ability to behave and to practice, literally do the work and constantly learn and learn and learn in the work that, takes that knowledge and it makes it come alive in a place of work, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense and aligns very much with what it all looks like in a day-to-day basis.
Brilliant, brilliant. Are there some additional thoughts you want to leave with people who are listening, people who are in programs of study that help them meet their NCA assessed requirements, people who are internationally trained lawyers who are doing the challenge exams, but especially to future lawyers or people who are sort of trying to figure out how to become a lawyer in another country? You may want to speak specifically to Canada. If there's some final points you want them to know.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of it would probably come from that same place that I started this conversation, in the sense that, it feels very, very hard when you first look at all the different steps you have. But a lot of people who are in this profession to start with are people who've gone through extensive, education, extensive standardized testing. So it's not like we haven't done hard things before. So this might be just another one of those. And just a point maybe specific to these experience that I'm living, but I believe it's very much the shared experience that my colleagues have as well, is that this is a place talking about this point in time and this geographic area where people are really open to sharing their experiences if you reach out. I'm just very, very glad to feel like I do have somewhat of a community in the profession because lawyers are open to sharing what took them to where they are, how their life goes on in a day-to-day basis. And many of the times they're just not in a position where they could help you in the sense of give you something immediate. And I understand the frustration sometimes when my colleagues are looking for articling or looking for a summer job, and those lawyers that are so nice with you and that have the nicest conversations just don't have any hiring power or any influence in the process in the sense that they can do that directly, but still they are willing and generous to share their time and to chat with you. So I would definitely say that that's important to me in the sense of building a community, understanding what goes on. I think it would be maybe boring to just talk with people who are all decision makers, right? So you definitely there's a definitely a bright side to that, to speaking to people who maybe don't have that level within the firm that maybe can even speak a little bit more candidly about what it looks like and so forth. So I would say, go ahead if you're thinking about it, if you're trying to put your pros and cons on the table, it's definitely a rewarding career. It's a very interesting one, and all of that into consideration. But also it's a profession that still rewards people in the financial sense well. So it's, if anything, there's another attractive to that, and it is a place that does accept international presence, regardless of what you might hear around or that you might experience in one more isolated experience. There are internationally trained lawyers in high places in all different kinds of firms. So don't be discouraged if you heard a bad experience that somebody had, or if you had one bad experience yourself, or maybe a few more than one. But I don't think it's worth giving up on your dream and your career just because of those. So I would say keep on keeping on.
What an inspiring moment to pause and reflect on so much of the conversation that we've had, not only in this podcast, but throughout the year. And perhaps we need to formally give you your mic back, because I think this is the final of our conversations. But before I officially give you the mic back, I just want to thank you for trusting me with this conversation, with the emergent quality of conversation and how it can lead in such surprising ways, but that inside there's so much wealth of wisdom and knowledge that you've been able to share with everyone. And thank you not only for that, for your vulnerability and your openness, your generosity. And so I've wished to now formally resign my role as co-host, and to once again thank you for the honor in being in community with you and to be in dialogue with you.
Well, the feeling of gratitude is just the same your way, Erica. Thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of this project. I really appreciate your insights, your questions, and being able to have you as a helpful advisor, and one that I'm so happy to think about what kind of a career you have where you can see people's lives changing, and all these experiences happening, and know that you played a role in that. Also want to acknowledge how much of a role you played in my own career as I go on my next steps. I really appreciate all your help, and we'll definitely stay in touch. Even if you don't come back as a co-host, I hope that our conversations never end, and I really appreciate your time here once again. And thank you guys for tuning into this series within the series in the show.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. This episode was sponsored by Contender. Check them out at contenderllc.com.